Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is shaving a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the deepest hour of the Forester night, when the mansion's lights flickered like trembling secrets trying to stay hidden, the entire world of the bold and the beautiful braced for a revelation that would change destinies forever. Because Dylan, mysterious, unpredictable and carrying more shadows than anyone ever realized, was caught in a moment so shocking, so catastrophic, so morally twisted that even the walls of the Forester estate seemed to hold their breath as Finn, usually calm and medically precise, stood frozen with his hands trembling at his sides, unable to comprehend the horror unraveling before him. Because there, right in the dimly lit nursery that had become the heart of so many hopes and dreams, Dylan was seen leaning over two bassinets, moving with the frantic, hushed intensity of someone who knew time was slipping through their fingers. Someone who knew that one wrong move would shatter everything. And yet, through a mixture of desperation, guilt, and a secret agenda nobody saw coming, they continued anyway, their fingers shaking as they reached toward the tiny, swaddled infants who represented innocence, truth, and the fragile future of two families whose lives were already spinning chaotically out of control. Because unknown to everyone, Dylan had been living under a crushing weight of secrets. Secrets tied to their past, their identity, and a web of manipulations orchestrated by forces far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. But that didn't matter right now. Not as Finn, having followed a feeling, a strange instinct, gnawing at them all day, burst into the nursery just as Dylan lifted one baby from its cradle and began lowering the other in its place, whispering something only the walls heard, something that carried a blend of sorrow and determination, and the second Finn's voice sliced through the air with a fierce echoing stop. Time stopped, the temperature changed at Dylan's breath caught mid-movement, and the baby in their arms let out the tiniest cry that pierced the silence like a siren. Because in that moment, the illusion shattered, and the truth, the twisted, unbelievable truth, stood exposed under the golden lamp that illuminated the horror Finn never imagined he'd witness. And as he stepped closer, trying to steady his breath while his mind spun with disbelief, he demanded answers, explanations, anything that could justify the unimaginable sight of Dylan being caught red-handed in an act so devastating that the emotional fallout alone could rival any scandal the Foresters or the Logans had ever faced. And Dylan, with eyes brimming with a torment that almost looked like regret, but not enough to outweigh the wrongdoing, slowly lowered the baby back into the bassinet, turning toward Finn with that haunted stare that carried an entire history of pain, betrayal, and buried storylines that had never been explained. Because what Finn had uncovered was not just a desperate act. It was a calculated plot months in the making. A plot tied to Luna's death. Lee's cover-ups, Grace's manipulations, and a chain of decisions so morally compromised that even Sheila Carter, with all her infamous crimes, would have hesitated before crossing such a line. And as Finn's heart pounded against his ribs, he tried to force himself into doctor mode to stay clinical, rational, focused, but he couldn't because this wasn't a patient crisis or a medical emergency. This was betrayal on a level he wasn't trained for. Personal attack in the safety and identity of innocent babies. And as he moved closer to Dylan, each slow step making his shock grow heavier. The weight of everything hit him. The sleepless nights, the inconsistencies in Dylan's behavior, the strange hesitations, the vague explanations, the moments he chalked up to stress or grief or trauma. All of it now rearranging itself into a horrifyingly clear picture. One that revealed Dylan had not accidentally wandered into the nursery, not being confused, not been exhausted. Dylan had known exactly what they were doing and Finn, voice from the adrenaline flooding through him, demanded, "Why? Why would you do this?" But Dylan didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped back, tears forming but never falling, voice cracking as they finally whispered that this wasn't supposed to happen, that someone forced their hand, that they didn't have a choice, that everything they did was to protect someone. But their explanation was tangled in evasions, half-truths, and confessions that made no sense. And as Finn pressed for clarity, demanding real answers, real reasons, Dylan broke down, admitting that for weeks they'd been under pressure from someone who knew their darkest secrets, someone who had promised protection in exchange for correcting a mistake. Someone who wanted these babies switched because of a bigger plan that involved lineage, inheritance, revenge, and a truth about one of the infants that had been hidden from the very beginning. A truth connected to a DNA test that was never meant to come to light. And Finn felt the ground beneath him tilt as Dylan revealed that one of the babies, one sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding them, didn't belong to the parents who believed they did. That a test result had been falsified long before Dylan ever set foot in that nursery. And Dylan, tormented, trembling voice barely audible, confessed that the baby-switching plot wasn't just a crime. It was the final step in a conspiracy meant to reshape power in Los Angeles, especially within the Forrester legacy, and Finn's mind reeled because nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the sheer audacity of such a scheme. And Heffeled his stomach dropped further when Dylan's gaze lifted again. Their expression shifting from fear to a numb, chilling hopelessness as they whispered that if Finn had arrived even a minute later, the babies would have been swapped completely, the parents deceived, the truth buried forever, and the consequences irreversible. And just as Finn opened his mouth to respond, the door swung open behind him, revealing Steffi, whose shocked gasps sent ripples of dread through the room as she clapped a hand over her mouth, tears already forming as she took in the horrific scene of Dylan standing between the bassinets. The babies nearly exchanged, and Finn's face pale with disbelief as tried to shield her from the full weight of what he just discovered. But Steffi pushed past him, voice trembling as she demanded to know whether one of those babies, their baby, had been in danger of being stolen, erased, replaced, and Finn, trying to be strong even as the truth crushed him, wrapped an arm around her and assured her that they got there in time, that nothing had been finalized, that he stopped the horror before it could become permanent. But Steffi's trembling didn't stop as she glared at Dylan, fury and heartbreak mixing in her eyes as she demanded Takno. Who put Dylan up to this? But Dylan only shook their head, refusing to name the mastermind, whether out of fear or misplaced loyalty. And Finn felt the frustration rise inside him. Because without the identity of the puppet master, the entire case would spiral into a deeper mystery. And as the babies let out soft cries, the room tensed further, the emotional stakes climbing higher, and Finn whispered to Steffi that they needed to call the authorities. But before he could reach for his phone, a new voice entered the room, cold, controlled, chilling, and far too calm to be innocent. And when Finn and Steffi turned, they saw Lee standing in the doorway,